All right, so we've got a really interesting situation brewing with this upcoming presidential inauguration. Looks like things are going to be a little different than planned. We've got a whole bunch of articles here talking about how the weather is going to throw a wrench in the works for Donald Trump's second term inauguration, which is supposed to happen on Monday.
Yeah, it's interesting how this isn't, just a simple change of plans. It kind of highlights how even the most meticulously planned events can be impacted by things totally outside of anyone's control,
Yeah.
especially something like a presidential inauguration with all its tradition and pomp and circumstance.
Yeah, for sure. We're talking record-breaking cold, potentially the coldest inauguration in over 40 years. So the big news is they're moving the swearing-in ceremony indoors. What do you think about that?
Well, it's not totally unprecedented. I mean, Reagan's second inauguration back in 1985 had to be moved indoors, too,
Uh,
because of the freezing temperatures. But this is going to be the second inauguration in a row moved indoors, which is pretty unusual. First, it was Biden's in 2021 because of the January 6th
well,
insurrection, and now this.
yeah, it makes you wonder if this is kind of like a sign of things changing in American politics, like a move away from that traditional grand outdoor spectacle.
It's definitely possible, and I can only imagine the logistical headache this is causing the organizers, moving everything from the outdoor platform on the National Mall to the Capitol Rotunda. You've got over 250,000 people with tickets for the outdoor event, and who knows how many more were expected to show up along the parade route or in the general admission areas. How do you even begin to fit all those people inside the Capitol Rotunda?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what happens to everyone who can't get inside?
Well, Trump has come up with some alternative arrangements. The rally that's scheduled for Sunday at the Capital One Arena in Washington is still happening as planned, and that has a capacity of 20,000. Yeah. He's also planning on making a visit to the arena after the inauguration for those supporters who couldn't get into the swearing in.
Okay, so at least there's that. But I bet a lot of people will be disappointed to miss the traditional parade.
Yeah, definitely. But they're planning on holding a modified version of the parade at the arena as well. And the 3 official inaugural balls on Monday night are still on schedule, too. They're trying to make the best of a tough situation.
22 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, that's brutal. I can't imagine having to stand outside in that for very long.
To put it in perspective, that's colder than Obama's inauguration in 2009. That was 28 degrees. But it's still not as cold as Reagan's second inauguration. That one was a bone-chilling 7 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow, that's cold. This whole thing with the Capitol Rotunda is kind of eerie when you think about it, especially with what happened there just 2 years ago.
Yeah, it definitely adds a layer of complexity to this event, holding the inauguration in one of the areas that was breached during the January 6th insurrection.
It's like a physical reminder of how divided things still are in this country. Speaking of history, I read that Trump is going to be sworn in using 2 Bibles. One is a family Bible, and the other is the same Bible that Abraham Lincoln used at his first inauguration back in 1861.
That's interesting. Using Lincoln's Bible could be seen as an attempt to draw parallels between Trump and a president who is, widely respected for his leadership during a time of national crisis.
Hmm.
It makes you wonder if it's a genuine attempt to invoke Lincoln's legacy or if it's more of a strategic move to appeal to a wider audience.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And then there's J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect. He's a rising star in the Republican Party. He's going to be sworn in on a family Bible that's been passed down through his family. It was originally his maternal great-grandmother's. Seems like family tradition is playing a big role in this inauguration. But there's another interesting aspect to this whole story. Did you hear about the meeting between New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Trump at Mar-a-Lago just a few days before the inauguration?
I did. A Democratic mayor meeting with a Republican president right before his inauguration. That's definitely not something you see every day.
Adams is saying that he's just there to discuss New York priorities with the incoming administration. But some of his opponents within his own party aren't so sure. They think he might be trying to get a pardon from Trump.
I can see why they might think that. It's definitely an unusual move.
So what is it that Adams wants to talk to Trump about? Well, according to reports, he wants to address a whole range of issues. Things like border security, potential cooperation with federal agents on deporting migrants who commit crimes in the city, transit and education aid.
That's quite a list.
It is.
It sounds like Adams is the kind of guy who's willing to work with anyone regardless of their political affiliation if it means getting things done for New York City. This isn't really out of character for him. Adams has a history of working with people from all across the political spectrum. He's always been more focused on getting things done than on partisan politics.
So maybe this meeting is less about trying to get favors and more about trying to find common ground. What do you think about that?
It's certainly a possibility, yeah. especially in today's political climate. It's so polarized. I think it's something we should be paying attention to. You've got the inauguration being moved indoors because of crazy weather to a place that just a couple of years ago was the site of a violent attack on democracy.
Hmm.
It's hard not to notice the parallels.
It's almost poetic, isn't it? It really makes you think back to that day on January 6th. The images of that mob storming the Capitol, the fear, the uncertainty, it really showed how fragile our democracy is. And it's still so fresh in everyone's minds.
It is. It's a reminder that the peaceful transfer of power is something we often take for granted, is a precious and hard-won right.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, what kind of tone do you think Trump will strike at this inauguration?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, who knows with Trump? He's so unpredictable. But given the circumstances, I wonder if we might see a more toned-down approach. Maybe even a message of unity? Do you think he'll try to play the role of the unifier?
It's possible. He is facing a deeply divided country, a global pandemic, not to mention a whole host of other challenges. So it might be in his best interest to try and project an image of strength and stability, to try and reassure the American people that he's the right person for the job. But then again, he's also been known to double down on his rhetoric, even when it's divisive or inflammatory. It's a tough balancing act for him. He needs to appeal to his base who want him to be a fighter, a disruptor. But he also needs to reach out to those who are skeptical of him, those who are looking for leadership and reassurance. It'll be interesting to see how he handles that.
Absolutely. And the fact that this inauguration is happening under such strange circumstances. With the move indoors and the increased security, it just adds another layer of intrigue to the whole thing. There's definitely a sense of anticipation in the air.
I agree. Everyone's waiting to see what he'll say, what he'll do, how he'll address everything that's happened. There's a feeling that this inauguration could be a turning point, like a moment that sets the tone for his second term. It's like we're starting a new chapter, but we have no idea what the story is going to be.
Okay, so we've talked about the move indoors, the historical parallels, the potential for a shift in tone from Trump. But what about the logistics of all of this? How are they going to fit all those people inside the Capitol Rotunda? It's a big space, but it's not exactly designed to hold hundreds of thousands of people.
Exactly. And remember, there were something like 250,000 tickets issued for the outdoor event, plus all the people who were planning to watch the parade or attend the general admission areas. It's likely that only a small group of people will be allowed inside the rotunda for the actual swearing-in ceremony. Dignitaries, VIPs, members of the press.
So what about everyone else? Where are they supposed to go?
Well, like we talked about earlier, Trump has organized an event at the Capital One Arena after the inauguration, which can hold up to 20,000 people. So that's probably going to be the main alternative for those who can't get into the swearing-in ceremony itself. But with this extreme cold, it's going to be a challenge to make sure those areas are safe and comfortable for people.
And then there's the whole issue of security. Moving the inauguration indoors creates a whole new set of challenges for the Secret Service and other law enforcement agencies. The Capitol Rotunda is a much more confined space than the National Mall, which makes it a lot harder to secure and control. And then you have the added concern of potential protests or disruptions, especially given what happened on January 6th. It sounds like this inauguration is going to be a logistical and security nightmare.
It does, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But it's also a testament to how resilient and adaptable our democracy is. Even with all these challenges, the show must go on.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. We're witnessing history in the making, and we have no idea what's going to happen next. It reminds us that even the most carefully made plans can be disrupted, and that sometimes the most unexpected events can lead to the most profound changes.
I like that. So as we head into this inauguration, we're left with a lot more questions than answers. Will Trump try to unify the country, or will he double down on his rhetoric? How are they going to deal with all the logistical challenges? What kind of impact will the events of January 6th have on everything? These are all questions that we'll have to wait and see the answers to. But as we watch this historic event unfold, we'll be reminded that while the future is never certain, it's always full of possibilities.
Well said. Now let's talk about this meeting between New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Trump at Mar-a-Lago. A lot of people are scratching their heads over this one. It seems like a pretty strange pairing on the surface, but when you consider Adams's history, it starts to make a little more sense.
Right. He's always been willing to work with people from both sides of the aisle, if it means getting things done for his city. So this isn't just some political stunt. He really thinks he can find some common ground with Trump.
It seems that way. Remember, Adams has been very vocal about his desire to work with the new administration on issues that are important to New York City. He's specifically mentioned things like border security, cooperation with federal agents on deportations. And funding for transit and education.
Those are some pretty big asks. Do you really think Trump is going to be receptive to that? Especially coming from a Democrat?
Well, Trump is from New York City himself, so he understands the challenges the city is facing. And he might be willing to work with Adams on some of these issues, especially if it benefits him politically.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but it's definitely possible that this meeting could actually lead to some good things for New York City.
Hopefully.
But Adams has been getting a lot of criticism for this meeting. Some people are even accusing him of trying to get a pardon from Trump.
Oh, yeah, I heard about that. That's a pretty serious accusation.
It
What
is.
is that all about?
Well, there have been rumors going around that Adams might be in some legal hot water from his time as a police officer. And his opponents are saying that this whole meeting with Trump is just a way for him to try and get a pardon before anything happens. That's a pretty serious claim.
It is. Is there any truth to it?
Well, as far as I know, it's all just speculation at this point. Adams has denied any wrongdoing, and there's no actual proof that he's looking for a pardon. But the fact that this meeting took place at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's private club, doesn't really help his case. It makes it look like some kind of shady backroom deal, even if that's not what's happening.
Yeah, I guess it does kind of look that way. So is this meeting a sign that the Trump administration and Democratic leaders might be able to work together? Or is it just a bunch of political posturing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's definitely encouraging to see a Democratic mayor who's willing to sit down with a Republican president,
Yeah.
especially one as controversial as Trump.
Yeah.
It makes you think that maybe there's still some hope for dialogue and compromise.
Yeah.
Even in these incredibly partisan times,
Yeah, you're right.
it shows that there's at least some willingness to work together. But there's also a lot of skepticism and distrust out there. People are wondering what Adams is really after and whether this meeting will actually do anything to help New York City. I guess only time will tell.
Only time will tell.
But it's definitely a situation worth keeping an eye on. It could be a sign of how political alliances might change in the future.
So it seems like this inauguration is going to be one for the history books. You've got the weather, the change of location, the security concerns, and then you've got this strange meeting between Adams and Trump. It's all coming together to create a pretty unique moment. It makes you think about the state of American politics and the challenges that the incoming administration is going to face. This whole thing with having to move the inauguration indoors because of the cold. Is it just a logistical hiccup, or is it a sign of something bigger? Are we going to see more of this kind of cross-party collaboration?
Those are some great questions. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. But it's a good reminder that even when things seem chaotic and uncertain, there's always something to be learned, something to be gained by paying attention and engaging with the world around us.
Well said. I think that's a great place to leave it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the upcoming inauguration. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.